today what I thought was to really pick your brains on a few challenges which the industry is facing,
Absolutely.
in marketing, in leadership, and really take your perspective on some of them. So let me. Okay, so Shiv, my first question to you, and straight away, let me ask you a tough one. Many brands these days are resorting to social messaging, and and you've seen the recent controversies on brands like Surf, Titan, and so on, where the brands have faced a lot of backlash and trolling by a minority. What is your take on this whole thing about brand social responsibility? Should brands even be doing these sort of things?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Ashok. And no, it's funny that nobody's ever asked me this before in all the discussion. So here's the first thing I would say: do you really need to do it? Ask yourself that. Okay. So when I ask that question, go back. I think every good company has had a brand strategy document or a brand key or whatever it is we used to call it, right? We used to have brand guidelines. Some people call it brand guardrails, whatever you want to call it. Now, was social and the challenges of social part of that brand? The answer is no. So just because a bunch of you sit together and say, okay, now let's do something about it, does not give you the license to do it. I think brands have a fundamental role to play in improving the lives of consumers. If they can stay with that, I think they are fine. So let's take, for example, the situations. Okay. Uh, does a brand say, for example, you know what, there's high inflation this year, I will not take a price increase? Never happens. Rarely happens, right?
Right.
Okay. Does a brand say there is inequality in this world and I'll address it? I can think of one brand who addressed diversity and inequality differently, which was Benetton. Okay. Those are fine. But I think to enter into domains like politics, like religion, etc., is not the area for brands. I am very clear in my mind. Why? The problems of the world are huge, some of them, some man made, some woman made, and politicians themselves are grappling with it. Now, it is not the role of brands to do it. Why would you want to do it? If your brand started off as that, I can still understand. For example, if a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, okay, said our business is to, let's take, change the whole concept of leprosy or this or that or whatever it is, and then they did something in that social area, I can still understand. But for some obscure food brand and obscure soft drink brand and obscure some other brand to do this, I think it's just a waste of time. I would say focus on your business, focus on your consumer, do the right thing. And I think all these areas are not really, value adding.
Right. Okay, let me move to the next hot topic these days, which is to do with data piracy and data privacy. Companies like Google, Facebook, they're all facing a lot of flag for crawling on data and using data to bombard you with messages and so on. We also know that the law in India is quite weak. Now, this could have, in my view, a serious impact on the way marketing changes course in the days to come. Would like to know your take on this.
Yeah, I think a great question. Thank you for asking that. So let's look at the whole issue of data privacy and what it means. It fundamentally means, the balancing of personalization and privacy. That's what it means. How personal can you get and how much of the data can you keep in a private manner? That's the real challenge. So let's go back to the history of timeline of data privacy. The first data privacy law was actually in the US around telephones in 1991, nearly 100 years after telephones came into being. Okay. It was the Telephone Act of USA, which said, you cannot be calling people and spamming people and asking them to buy. That was the first one. The serious one after digital era came in 2018, which was the GDPR, started in Europe. In 2019, you had the California, Privacy Act, but more important, in 2020, Ashok, you had the California, proposition number 24, which simply says you cannot target people based on their online activity. Okay, that's as simple as that. I said this, I think, in a December article for Hindu Business Line, that social media will come under severe scrutiny and will be regulated in 2021. You see that happening already, whether it's India, elsewhere, etc. So in my book, you have to be extremely clear. If the consumer feels that you're using the data to do something about the consumer or selling the data of the consumer to somebody else, they will never forgive you for it. On the other hand, if you use the data to say, I can help you with something, I can ease your decision making process, etc., then they might still, say okay to that. I think you will see more and more, I would think, challenges by consumers on brands and consumers on companies in terms of violating their data. The other one is companies having large chunks of data and some hacker or somebody else releasing that data. Imagine if data on health was released. Imagine if data on incomes was released, or loans was released, or debt was released. That could have a severe impact on the reputation of the person. And I think that will become even more serious. And there will be, I personally believe, fresh laws. We've had libel laws. I believe there will be data breach laws in the next few years.
In this context, there is an increasing shift of marketing spends to digital marketing. Now, while you and I have probably done our marketing during the times when traditional marketing was the only marketing we all knew, traditional media, how do you see this whole landscape changing? How do you see the function of marketing itself changing over the times? And what would your advice be to a lot of brands which even today rely heavily on traditional media?
Yeah, I think that's another great question. This is a question I've been asked many times over from the Internet Marketing Association, MMA, etc. So let's look at the big picture first, and let's start with advertising. How is advertising spend going to play out in 2022? In advertising spend terms, the total advertising spend in India is going to be 70,000 crores in 2022. Okay. In 2021, if I stay with that, it's 63,000 crores, of which traditional media is 43 and digital is 18. So digital is already 30%. At this current level of 43, traditional media is less than what it was in 2017 and 2016, believe it or not. It's going backwards. Okay, digital spends are growing of the order of 30-40% every year. Okay, and traditional advertising or spends are growing at the rate of 5 to 7% a year. Okay, now in digital, how is the spend going across? And that will be a good clue to what you asked me. Display banners is dropping. Okay, video is increasing, spend on video. Spend on social media is increasing, paid search is dropping. Okay, now let's look at who are the big industries using digital. The biggest industry, 1/4 of all digital advertising is e-commerce, believe it or not, because they're the platform. Second is consumer durables, which is 17%. FMCG is 14%. Telecom is 13%. Okay, so that's what I would see. Now, let me give you some stats in terms of the impact of e-commerce right now. Modern trade took 20 years to come to 10% of total sales in metropolitan cities. It took 20 years. E-commerce has taken 7 months or so. Today in metropolitan cities, okay, FMCG sales as a part of this thing is 12%. In the festival period, I'm focusing on FMCG because the bulk of your people are FMCG. In the festival period in November, 35% of all bills cut on e-commerce were FMCG. They accounted only for 5% of value. So here's my first proposition to you. E-commerce will use FMCG as a loss leader. Wake up to that. Now let's look at two other things. I think I talked about channel. Look at private label. India has never had private label. We've never had quality private label. That's one of the reasons brands succeeded, multinationals succeeded. Anybody with a decent brand had a premium. That is changing right now. As e-commerce multiplies, you'll see the birth of and the flourishing of private label. There are many e-commerce brands which are now private label. For example, Amazon buys 234 million different pieces to sell in India. Okay. Now let's look at the old model of thinking and the new model of thinking. The old model of thinking for most brand managers and most marketeers was, if I don't have a strategy, get a celebrity, spend on television or sponsor a cricket program or something, and my brand is king. That's what we said. Most people said that. Now let's look at what's happening today. It's about influencer marketing. It's about word of mouth. It's about doing good to society. And 90% of content is not experienced in a meaningful way. So summarizing that, I would say The past world of marketing was product experience, advertising experience, shopping experience. The new world of marketing, thanks to digital, is first is browsing experience. Is the user interface on your website very good? Is it fluid? Okay, number one. Second is information experience. Is all the information available there? Third is the buying experience. Is it easy to buy? Okay, is the credit card payment easy? Is the Paytm payment easy? Is the EMI easy? Then is the delivery experience. Am I getting it at the time that you are telling me or promising me? Then is the product experience. So the number of experiences a consumer is going through in picking a brand or a service has multiplied, and a lot of that experience is coming via digital assurance.
So what would be two or three things you would tell today's young marketer if you were to take a session for in a second year
That's
MBA's
exactly what
class?
I said. You're just not selling a product, you're selling an experience, the totality of the experience, number one. Think of the direct to consumer route, which has the least friction and the shortest distance. That's the second thing I would say. Third, I would say is that don't just rely on data. Okay, everybody has data, but get to insights. That's what I would say.
Shiv, you always worked in businesses and brands which had huge amounts of marketing spends. One of the challenges we face as an industry today is measurement. Uh, you know, uh, Print is still has got an age-old IRS measurement. Television measurement is going through its own challenges. You're aware. We read the newspapers, and a lot of the traditional media still has got very iffy measurement. In your opinion, how important is measurement for you, and how would you actually measure the success of a large campaign?
I think measurement has always been important, Ashok. And I think John Caples wrote that first book on tested advertising methods. I remember as a trainee, picking up that book in Abbott's bookshop in Abbott's Road, Hyderabad. A fascinating book. Okay. So, where he argued that putting a coupon at the right hand side of a newspaper ad works and things like that. Okay. Measurement has always been important, but it's never been mastered. And I don't think it'll ever be mastered. As simple as that. Okay. Many people have said many things about what happens to my advertising and things like that. I would say that in the digital world we're trying to get more and more there. In the Mobile Marketing Association we've tried to do that. Let me give you some simple factors on which we've run advertising in the past. We've run it on share of voice, share of market. One example. Okay, it was a measurement technique, right? Saying you can be 30% less than your share of market if you're a market leader, etc. The other thing we've run our advertising on is based on objectives. What are our objectives for the year and how much are we going to spend in order to meet that objective? The third thing we've done is per ton of detergent sold or per ton of soap sold or per kg of tea sold or per kg of coffee or per mobile phone sold. What's the cost of customer acquisition and what's the margin we make? So we've tried to quantify cost of customer acquisition. In a digital world, there are a number of things which are coming together. One is advertising. What's the final proof of advertising? That you advertise, somebody goes to the shop, somebody buys your product, and you're able to tie that up. Today, people like Google are able to give you some data which says, having seen your advertising, did your consumer go to the shop and what did he buy? Now, here's a surprising fact which I learned talking to the Google boys, Ashok, about 2 weeks ago. 80% of the data has location attached to it. 80% of the data today has location attached to it. So I think that is where we'll end up, where you will find people saying, okay, in the past, did my consumer see the ad was the measurement? Second, did he comprehend it was the second measurement? Okay, that's why we did day after recall, basis test, all kinds of stuff. Now it is, has the consumer moved to action and where did he go buy? And at what price did he buy? I think we are closing the loop one after the other. It will never be an exact science, but I think more and more technology will actually help us. But the biggest, and I caution everybody on the call, the biggest variable here is the consumer allowing you to use the data from his mobile phone. The consumer saying, you can track my location, I'm willing to give it to you. That is the biggest variable.
Changing tack a little bit. Shiv, you worked in companies like Nokia and PepsiCo, uh, and you've led them successfully at the time when they have gone through massive structural changes because of factors beyond extraneous factors, like Nokia had its own challenges, of attack from smartphone and so on and so forth, dual SIM phones and so on. PepsiCo, underwent huge structural changes because of the resistance to sugar and so on and so forth. So much so that these companies actually almost underwent a change in their basic DNA. So my question to you is, how have your experience been as an insider in these transitionary times? What went wrong, do you think, in hindsight, with their approach, and how do brands or businesses bring about these fundamental change in their thinking to change the very DNA of their business? And what have been your learnings for as a marketeer or as a leader
Yeah.
managing these?
So let's take first Nokia and then I'll go to PepsiCo. So if you look at Nokia, it was a very small company when I joined them in 2005-6. We went on to become India's largest multinational by 2010, which was a $4 billion business. And we had total activity of $10 billion from India. We were one of the largest exporters from Chennai factory of $2 billion worth of phones, etc. So huge company, huge impact. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We had enormous market share and we had a fantastic ecosystem. We were the son of the ecosystem. Now, what happened? First, dual SIM happened. Why did dual SIM happen? Because the operators said, hey, the newer operators, we went from something like 6 or 7 effective operators to 19. Okay. The new operator said, I can't fight with the incumbents, so let me offer paisa per second. When the paisa per second happened, I actually called the operator who did this and said, you're going to destroy this industry. This is not right. Okay. So you know what he told me? Shiv, this is my only gambit. I can't think of anything else to do. I said, fair enough. And that operator is out of business today. Okay. And I said this to him in 2010 or 11. In 10 years, he's no longer there or that company is no longer there. So we missed the dual SIM. So that's the reason dual SIM started. So when dual SIM started, okay, it's not that we didn't know about it. We had picked it up. We had early sensing mechanisms. Vineet Taneja, who you know very well, was marketing manager. Okay, he wrote number of notes. We pushed the global system, etc. Now here's the catch. In most parts of the world, a mobile phone is sold with a package, which is a subscription plan. Now the operators globally kept pushing back to Nokia saying, why would I want a 2 SIM phone when I'm only selling 1 SIM to the consumer? So they said, look, we don't want this. So Nokia kept dithering. Finally, Olli-Pekka Kolosua, who's our CEO, he said, India is too important for me. We are number one for Nokia by volume. We became number one by value and profit later on. He said, Nokia is too important for me. To hell with you guys, we're going to launch a dual SIM phone. That's how dual SIM happened. From being 22 share of dual SIM, we went to 53 share of dual SIM in 8 weeks' time. Okay, that was the strength of the brand. The second turn for Nokia was Windows. Nokia's biggest strength, and I was running emerging markets then, Nokia's biggest strength was emerging markets. Average selling price of a phone under $100, okay, and vernacular. When we went with Windows, Windows didn't have a phone below $200. And Windows did not have anything but English, full stop, okay? And Windows had 3% market share, whereas Nokia had 35 to 40% market share in phones. So it was a marriage, I would say, made in hell virtually. It had no chance of working. And that's why Nokia had to reverse its strategy very quickly and launch an Android phone after that. Today, Nokia is in complete Android. There again, I think the front line knew, and everybody knew that Android is the way to go. But right or wrong, the board decided, along with the CEO, to go the Windows route, and that was a big challenge. Okay, now what the lesson from there? I remember trying to convince people to do this. And when you're a leader, what happens is, and when you're a leader at the top, when you start challenging a strategy or saying the strategy is not working, people think you're not committed to the strategy, which is a very sad part. This I've seen in every company, whether it's Levers, whether it's Nokia, whether it's PepsiCo, it's no exception. Okay. The guys who are really brave will tell you the truth. And you have to ask yourself, is he telling me the truth or is he just, stonewalling? Now, if you asked anybody in Nokia, they would have told you, look, let's go with Android. So the CEO's voice, CEO of emerging markets, which was me, mine was a collective voice. I was not trying to derail the strategy of Windows, which Nokia wanted to do. I was just trying to tell them that if you went multi-brand, if you went multi-platform, maybe it would be better. So you do a Windows phone, do an Android phone too, because that is where Nokia's strength is. So that's the first lesson I would say. PepsiCo is a very different game. A brand company, 20 brands, unprofitable all its career in India. So the brief was to make it profitable. Now, here's the thing which you have to understand about organization, the signal you give. I think PepsiCo India had got the signal that their only job was to drive volume. Their job was not to drive profit. Their job was not to contribute profit to the global PepsiCo organization. So they did everything to drive volume. So much so they would sell below cost, they would sell water. The whole mix was completely gone. So to put discipline to do the right things, time and again, the discipline to pivot the strategy. Sugar is a problem, but if you worked in the industry for 20 years, you don't see it as a problem. Okay. Secondly, salt is a problem. Okay. But if you worked in the industry for 20 years, you'll never see the problem. It's only new people who will come in and see it. And that's why I really admire two people. Gorbachev. After 30 years of working in the Communist Party, in the 31st year for him to say communism doesn't work, we need to change, is a great sign of maturity. The second guy, the Philip Morris CEO, 2 months ago, he said, in 15 years' time or less, cigarettes will cease to exist as a category. I think soft drinks are headed that way. Okay. You don't keep soft drinks in your refrigerator, Ashok. You don't give soft drinks to your kids. So many mothers don't do that. So when you're in a company, you hope against hope that things will continue. That's the real problem. So we had to do a number of things to put it down, to get focus and actually pivot into much more nutritious categories, value-added water, etc. But it's difficult for people to change their, thinking. The thinking in PepsiCo always has been celebrity, pump in advertising, let's do this, etc. That has to change even today. And I believe, that the glory days of soft drinks being cool brands are over. And if you look at the current set of advertising in the soft drink industry, that tells you how uncool they are right now. They're just nowhere near, being cool. So trying to make something uncool cool is another lesson I would tell people that never try to do it. Okay, that's actually a wrong strategy. Yeah, and Varun has worked with me, so he can add to that also. Yeah.
So do you think this baggage of negatives which the brand is now carrying, they would be able to shake off this baggage, even if they migrate to newer categories and so on?
Tough. See, the thing is, there are some categories which don't go beyond its category boundaries, Ashok. And I've learned this the hard way in my life. For example, a hair brand can never get into skin, but a skin brand can get into hair. It's a funny thing. Globally, this is what is true. Similarly, all the push we have done around core colas to go somewhere else has never worked. It's not worked for Coke, it's not worked for Pepsi, it's not worked for Thumbs Up, nobody. Okay, so there's something which defines it. And I think that category is boxed in right now. You need a severe pivot and maybe a
Okay, I'm now completely changing topic. What is this shift? You writing a book?
I don't want me to.
Well, we always thought that you would be the first guy to write a book, but you sort of at some point said, listen, I don't know when I'm going to write the book. So why suddenly this thought of a book? And that's one. And a linked question is, why on a very niche topic, which is to do with, more like a problem solving for managers in midlife crisis, rather than sticking to your core strength, which is marketing, leadership, and so on. How did you come about talking about the subject?
Yeah, so the publishers have been asking me to write a book for more than 10 years, Ashok. I think the first time it started was 2009 or 10. And I think one of the publishers actually, they came, sat down with me, interviewed me, put out a concept note, etc. But I've just never done it. Somehow, I just didn't find the time. Till my current editor, Radhika Marwa in Penguin, she said, enough is enough, you have to write. I'm not moving out of your office if you don't give me your commitment and, put it down on paper. So I finally committed to her that I'll write. And once I decided to write, I actually asked around and looked around. And one of the things I found in a changing India in the year 2019 was a lot of people were worried about their careers. They were just not able to trust either their boss or the HR system or the company, because company lifespan itself had become so short. So they said, you know what, how do we manage our careers for the long term? That was one of the repeating, things which I heard. So I said, okay, let me talk about career dilemmas. I started by saying, let me talk about career temptations. But temptation sounded sinful. And in discussion with Ramcharan and Indra Nui, I said, look, dilemma is a better thing. Dilemma is when you have two good alternatives in front of you, and then you pick from that. I started with 15 dilemmas and 60 people to interview. I ended with 10 dilemmas and 24 people to talk to. Okay, so that's how I funneled it. And in the pandemic, the weekends in the pandemic really gave me a lot of time to edit and re-edit, etc. And we finally launched it on Jan 15th online version, Feb 15th physical version. So that's how it happened.
I understand that the book is already doing well and it's kind of hit the top of the chart. So congratulations.
Thank
Can you talk a little more about the book? What have been your key discoveries in the course of your research? Are there any key messages that you're giving?
Oh yeah. So this is the book, Ashok. It's called The Right Choice. Okay, resolving 10 career dilemmas for extraordinary success. And the dilemmas that I cover are: is money the most important variable in a career? Should I do a second MBA or a first MBA itself? Should I live apart from my spouse in order to advance my career? While working elsewhere, should I go back to the organization I previously worked in? Should I take a sabbatical? Should I switch industries in a career? Should I take up an overseas job? Should I turn entrepreneur? Okay, should I join a board or not join a board? And what are the dilemmas of being a CEO? So I've traced the journey of a young manager from a management trainee to a managing director and said, this is what you go through. And I got various people to talk about it. The thing is, writing a book, Ashok, is a deeply personal thing. You know, all of us have worked for brands. When brands do well or don't do well, it's the company which gets the flag. When you write a book, it's your IPR. The book sells or fails on the strength of your name. Full stop. Okay, people can like it or not like it. Full stop. Okay, and okay, I've had lots of positive comments, some negative comments, etc. But that's life. But I tell you, my biggest lesson is in this whole exercise. I think the bookshop as a concept will die if the publishers and the bookshops do not innovate. Okay, having studied this business model and what's happening out there, I think the e-commerce boys will kill the bookshop with their discounts, etc. So I think the publishing industry will have nothing but e-commerce, and they'll be hostage to one business model if they continue like this. So that's my biggest lesson. They need to reinvent themselves fast. Next lesson: very few authors make money, believe it or not, Ashok. So writing a book is a hobby. Actually, you actually have to spend money. Okay, so it doesn't make money at all. So if you're looking to write a book to make some money, forget it. Okay, it just doesn't work. Okay, so that's just out of the question. And the third lesson I've learned is the way you can consume a book is very different. For example, audiobooks are taking off in India right now. So I've just finished recording over the last 3 weekends with a studio in Bombay. I went and did all the chapters I wrote myself. I finished recording that. So it's a very different experience, completely different experience, but it's been great fun.
So, Shiv, moving on, you've been yourself a kind of role model to many young managers. If I were to ask you, who has been your role model in your professional career? And has there been one, many different people at different stages? And what about them did you find inspiring?
I think it'll be many role models, Ashok. It's only natural. When you are a child, your parents are your role model, obviously. Then you go to school, your teachers are your role models. I remember in my school, we had an English teacher called Mrs. Marks, and she looked at the essays I had written, and I think I had top mark in class of 66 or something in English, and that was the best marks. And she called me and said, "You know what, Shiv? You should continue to write it. You're good at it. Don't ever give it up." Now imagine when you are 9, anybody telling you you're good at anything. Most people tell you you're not good at anything when you're 9. Okay. But for her to say that, then I owe her a lot. Okay. So that really, she was a role model. Then as you start work, your early bosses, okay, people you work with, okay, so people you read about. I remember reading about Robert McNamara and how he was fastidious about attention to detail. He was Secretary of State, and he was challenging the army chief as to why did he need $2 billion to buy helicopters. So the army chief said, "No, I'm not asked for $2 billion. So are you telling me that I don't know my budget?" So McNamara says, "I don't know about that, army chief, but in page 161 of your submission, it says $2 billion. I'm only quoting from that." So he had read his material more than anybody else. He had come prepared for the meeting. So the concept of being thoroughly on top of your job with the right attention to detail is something that I learned from reading about McNamara. Then your own bosses, your own set of bosses, whether it is the Anand Bhatias of this world, the Sridhars of this world, Sanjay was one, Rishi Bhattacharya was an outstanding marketing thinker. One learned a lot of marketing just working with Rishi, much more about business and things like that. And Keki, Harish, so a number of people, so that's OPK, the person who recruited me into Nokia, Indra. So you go through a number of people. And I think as you go, I think you also realize one thing, Ashok, is that no leader is perfect. And I think that's a mistake a lot of young people make. And that's what I would submit to your people also on the call. No leader is perfect, and no leader should try to be perfect also. Okay. And you should just do what's right. And what I have found is the best leaders do what is right for the institution first, what is right for the team second, and what's right for themselves third. When that order flips, when the leader starts doing what is right for himself first, that's when the company is in trouble.
So in your long career, I'm sure there have been a lot of what I call as Eureka moments on both marketing and leadership. Where you really either hit pay dirt, or you really hit upon something really brilliant, or something which really changed the way you think. So can you talk about some such Eureka
Yeah,
moments which have left a lasting impression on you?
yeah. So this comes back to legacy, Ashok. So if you talk of legacy, it is doing something which lasts time. Okay. And your contribution is regarded as something like that. You know, in the pandemic around August, I got a call from Kishore, who used to be the personal products, sales officer. Today, he's the area sales manager for beverages in Hindustan Leather in Chennai. He called me to say, boss, I want to tell you something. The 2 kg pack that you introduced has saved our lives. Okay, now that's an idea of direct to consumer, which I put in 1994, believe it or not. Okay, everybody trashed it. SG Murli, our famous financial controller, said, hey, Shiv, what are you trying to do, etc., blah, blah, etc. Then I went as branch manager and I actually had to, sell it, etc. Today, that business model, those two pack sizes account for 40% or more of the business sales today. Okay, that's something direct to consumer in a physical world we started in 1994 or whenever it was. That's one. The second one is shampoos. Again, Hindustan Lever lesson. Okay, the board and the company was loath to going into 50 paisa and 1 rupee. Okay, we challenged them and said you had to do it. They said no, let's protect 2 rupees, etc. We said 2 rupees will be an utter failure in the next 1 or 2 years. We finally went and launched 50 paisa and 1 rupee. Even today, the market is at 50 paisa and 1 rupee and not at 2 rupees. Now, I'm talking 17 years later after I did that. Okay, so these are some things which at that point of time is intuition. You've talked to the consumer, you have a good sense of what to do, but people around you and the company is not able to see it because they're used to an old habit, exactly the sugar, salt logic which I told you. Okay, but years later, when 17 years later, people in Unilever or London still say, hey, that was the right thing you did. That gives, that's a Eureka moment for me. Okay, that's what I was.
So I'm sure, Shiv, in your long career, you would have had your own share of challenges or disappointments. Uh, can you talk about some? How did you handle them, and what did you learn from it?
No, you handle, you'll have disappointments right through. Okay, so if I look at my career, about 85-90% of the time, I had growth in my career, in the business I led, or in the brand I led, or whatever it was. And in that 10% of the time, in the 3-4 years that I didn't get it, okay, it's not that I didn't work hard, Ashok. You work 48/7, but then you're racking your brains to say, why the hell am I not getting results? Okay, sometimes the gods conspire against you, sometimes the economy conspires against you, whatever it is, but growth didn't happen. The key thing I would say is in each of these moments when growth did not happen, okay, in the darkest days of dual SIM in Nokia, in the darkest days of no profit in PepsiCo, etc., in the darkest days of the IPL challenge in PepsiCo, you just have to dig back into your resilience to say, and look at yourself and say, have I done enough? Am I doing the right things? As long as you can answer that honestly to yourself, I think you'll be fine. That's been my lesson through all my disappointments. Okay. And the next thing is, remember, things will go up, things will go down. Don't worry about it. But if you are relevant, if you invest in yourself, you'll do well. Let's take Nokia as an example. Nokia collapsed in 2013, right? I was one of the last senior managers to leave Nokia, of the top 25 managers. But if you look at all the Nokia boys and girls, they've bounced back. Okay, we didn't go into a shell in 2013 saying that's the end of life. Okay, I went on to PepsiCo, I've come to ABG, I've written a book. Vipul Sabharwal went to Luminous, Vineet Taneja went to Dyson. So we all found our own place. Okay, it was an outstanding company with outstanding individuals, but that ship crashed. Okay, but we all of us had resilience and belief in ourselves to come back. So what I would tell you guys is, even through the hardest times, guys, remember, okay, you have to come out of it. Nobody else will, pull you out of it. You have to have the mental strength and fortitude to say, I'm going to fight back. I'm going to give myself the best chance. That's what is my learn.
Okay, so I'm going to come to my last question before I then open up the audience questions. So, Shiv, you've now traversed what is clearly a very very enviable career, right from your trainee days to where you've reached, and you pretty much achieved all that one would like to achieve professionally. Now, at this stage of your career, what gives you sleepless nights, and what gives you a good night's sleep?
So, what gives you sleepless nights as a leader always are if you are not relevant. See, for example, you've got people on IAA logging into this. If whatever I say is not relevant to these people, that would give me a sleepless night, which basically says I'm out of touch with the times. Okay. So I deal with people who are 25 years old. I deal with people who are 75 years old. I deal with people who are 50 years old. Okay. I deal with technology. I deal with this, etc. So your ability to stay relevant is the most important thing. If anybody would told me, Shiv, you're irrelevant in today's world in management thinking or business thinking, that would really, keep me awake all night. Okay, that's what
And what would you give you a good night's sleep?
I think contributing to society in whichever way, like contributing to, you and your gang of IAA right now. I've done so many of these sessions for various people. I did a session for Nivea. I did a session for others. So contributing back some way or the other, I think it gives me a good thing.
Okay, so there are a few questions. Let me just ask them.
Yeah,
Um,
all yours.
so this is a question from Venkatadri.
Oh, our old friend.
Yeah, hi Shiv. How is behavioral economics supporting customer understanding?
Oh, it does a lot. I think there's a chap called Suskind who wrote this book on nudge. I would really ask you to read that. It's a lovely book on what people do or people don't do and how do you nudge them. If you look at behavioral economics today, right now for marketers, I would say, okay, three things I would say. Number one, how will you look at the at-home consumer? Because life is not going to come back to normal for another few months. The at-home consumer behavioral economics and theory is very different from an out and about consumer. So I think that is something that companies must invest in. Second is the concept of cookies is dying thanks to Apple and Google. Okay. So now that gives more power to the e-com boys. So what's going to be the behavior, in terms of e-com? One of the fundamental shifts I believe, and I've been warning brand managers of this, in the past, the hierarchy was, we thought of a brand, we thought of a price point, we thought of a place to pick it up, we thought of a service. Today, if you look at it, the first thing people search for is by a category, not a brand anymore. That's the behavior shift. Second, they say, this is my price band. Do you have something there? Then they look for the terms and deals, and then they look for the brand. Let me expand. If you look at the top 10 list of anything before 2015, Coca-Cola was the number one brand. And in that list of brands, you had 6 consumer brands. Today, in the top 10 list, you have just 3 consumer brands. I think it's Coke, it's McDonald's, and one more, I forget. Okay, just 3 consumer brands. Okay, look at the market cap of company. Look at any measure, it's technology which leads it. So it's technology brands which are cool. It is not consumer brands which are cool anymore. Okay, that's a fundamental behavior shift because people believe that technology solves their problems more than anything else. And the third behavioral shift which I'm seeing is something to do with health and wellness. So if you're selling a service, how can you sell a contactless service is the challenge, which is what consumers want. They don't want contact service, contactless service. Let me give you a great example of proof of contactless service in the biryani market in Bangalore. Here's this company selling biryani, and what they do to give you confidence on health and wellness, Ashok, is they send you a card or a paper of the temperature of all the employees who have touched that product before it comes to your house. That's the proof point of health and wellness.
Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah.
Okay, that is how behavior is shifting. Okay, I've just given you 3 examples. I'm sure there are many more.
Okay, there are a couple of questions from Varun. The first one is, how do you see cost structures getting impacted due to the shift and of media to digital and data sciences? I am
That's
presuming
a
that he's
great
talking
question.
about media cost
Yeah,
shifting from traditional.
absolutely. This morning itself, one of the CEOs was talking to me about this in the Aditya Birla group. He said, Shiv, for normal traditional media, we pay X as commission, and for digital media, we pay 3X. So he said, now, this year, my spend is the other way around. I'm going to spend a lot more on digital. So why should we end up giving so much more commission? And I think this is a real concern of cost which the brand has to bear as more and more people shift digital. In 2019, digital spends globally was higher than physical spends. In India, right now, we are at 34%. I believe by 23 or 24, I think max by 25, digital spends will be more than physical spends. So the whole cost structure, the agency remuneration, every single thing will change. And I think more and more brands are under cost pressure right now. And hence they look for every single dollar.